Hello and welcome to What the F*** Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. Welcome to day 547. A bipartisan group of senators reached a deal to reform the 130-year-old Electoral Count Act, which Trump and his allies tried to exploit as part of their attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. The legislation would clearly define the role of states, presidential electors, and the vice president in a presidential election to prevent the events of January 6, 2021 from happening again. A second bill would increase penalties for threatening or intimidating election officials, and it would clarify how the post office should handle mail-in ballots. The proposal, however, still needs to be approved by both chambers and will need at least 10 Republican senators to break a filibuster. Meanwhile, Trump called Wisconsin's Republican House Speaker, quote, within the last week, end quote, and urged him to decertify Biden's 2020 election win in that state. Robin Vos said he received a call from Trump after the state Supreme Court ruled that most absentee ballot drop boxes in Wisconsin are illegal. Quote, he would like us to do something different in Wisconsin, Vos said. I explained it's not allowed under the Constitution. He has a different opinion, end quote. Moving on, the Trump administration tried to add a citizenship question to the census in 2020 to help Republicans win elections, not to protect people's voting rights. This according to a report issued by the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. The documents, which included drafts of internal memos and secret email communications between political appointees at the Commerce Department, contradict the statements that were made under oath by then Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, who claimed that the Trump administration wanted to add the question in order to enforce the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and that the citizenship question was unrelated to congressional apportionment. The Supreme Court ruled in June 2019, however, that that rationale appears to have been contrived, and then a week later, Trump abandoned the effort to add the citizenship question to the 2020 census. Rudy Giuliani has been ordered to testify before a special grand jury in Georgia, which is investigating efforts to overturn Trump's 2020 electoral loss in that state. Giuliani was subpoenaed earlier this month as a material witness by the grand jury, called to investigate any, quote, coordinated attempts to unlawfully alter the outcome of the 2020 elections, end quote. The subpoena says Giuliani falsely claimed that there had been widespread voter fraud in that state. A New York judge ordered Giuliani to testify on August 9th, after he failed to appear at a July 13th hearing to challenge the subpoena. Moving on, Biden called climate change an emergency, a clear and present danger, and an existential threat, but stopped short of declaring a formal climate emergency, which would have unlocked federal resources to address climate change. Instead, Biden announced a set of executive actions to expand offshore wind power generation and provide $2.3 billion in funding for climate disaster preparedness and projects like cooling stations in places that face extreme heat. Biden says he'll announce additional executive actions in the coming weeks if Congress fails to act. And finally, about 105 million people in 28 states, making up roughly a third of the United States, are currently living under heat advisories and excessive heat warnings. More than 200 million people in the United States will experience highs exceeding 90 degrees for the next 3 days. And in the polls, NPR says 36% of Americans say they approve of the job that Biden is doing as president, his lowest approval rating since taking office. Last month, Biden's approval rating was at 40%. The 4% drop from June to July is attributed to a 9-point decline among Democrats broadly. In June, 84% of Democrats said they approved of Biden's job, compared to 75% in July. Meanwhile, 5% of Republicans and 28% of independents say they approve of the job Biden is doing, unchanged from a month ago. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditis.